Well, sometimes, sometimes it's the smallest of changes that have the largest effect. Shadowbringers seems to have that as an ethos with the quality of life and user experience changes that are coming along with the new expansion. So much so that they even included a slide, which when I saw at the media tour, I was so happy that they had a slide that said user interface. Unfortunately, it also had and more, so we don't know all of the stuff we're getting, and we won't know all of the stuff we're getting until we get the patch notes. But in this video, we'll be focusing on two of the little elements in the new user interface. And I know what you're thinking, Brian, you're gonna devote an entire video to two interface elements with all of the stuff? And I'm like, yes, I am devoting an entire video to those two things, because when I saw them and then figured out and tried to speculate why they did these changes, why they made these new elements and how they did them the way they did, my mind was blown. These are two things that you'll be using on a daily basis in your Shadowbringers experience, and I cannot wait to go over them. So, are you ready to talk about user experience? All right, let's head in. So we're gonna be looking at two parts of the party list. The first thing is the MP display, which piggybacks off the whole conversation of why did they cap MP in the first place? Why is the max MP now 10,000? The second thing we'll go over is something that Yoshi P announced at the Las Vegas Fan Fest, which is the ability to see how much shield is actually applied to a character. So let's start with the MP display. Now, we know that MP is a calculated number, and it's arbitrary in a way. For the purposes of our discussion, MP doesn't really mean anything on its own. When you look at MP and when you're saying that you're running out of MP, you're not noticing the number, you're noticing the bar. Whether it's the bar in your HUD or it's the bar in the party list, you're noticing that depleting. So if you're a white mage, for instance, and I'm one, but not a very good one, and I see my bar get to 3/4 or a half, I'm like, oh, I should pop Lucid Dreaming, regen my MP, refresh my MP, and I determine that via the bar, but the number doesn't really mean anything to me. So when they instituted a cap, and kind of the reason I wanted to bring this up for discussion is the fact that, people were like, oh, they're capping it at 10,000. Uh-oh, WoW did that, World of Warcraft did that, so I don't know what this means. And before I go on, I want to say that I did a little bit of research on why WoW capped their MP. And if you have stories for me or elaborations on how they did it or why they did it, please leave them in the comments. I'd love to learn. I love learning about the comparisons between both games. That aside though, I have a friend named Pook who I went to and I asked him, Pook, why did they do this? And for, TLDR reasons, he pretty much said it was a prohibitive measure. It was a way to literally cap people from getting too much MP. In 14, at least from the way I read it and the way that they displayed on the UI, that's not the case. So let me stop introducing this whole concept. Let's go to the party list. And I'm just gonna leave that there for a sec. And I want you to look at it and think to yourself, what's weird about this piece of UI? I'll give you a second. Got something? If you noticed that the two zeros, the 1 and the tens place, are smaller than the other digits, then boom, we're on the right track. We're on the same page so far. So if you decrease the last two numbers, what does that emphasize? That emphasizes is 100. Why is 100 important? Because I believe it's a percentage. My speculation is that they've turned the MP bar into a percentage bar by capping it off at 10,000 and redoing the MP of all the skills. So let me give you an example with my Dark Knight. In current Stormblood, the Blackest Night, Dark Knight Shield, it costs 2,400. I have 9480 MP at item level around 384 and level 70, of course. For most people, doing the math on how many times you can cast TBN before you can't anymore is a bit tough. In this case, yes, you can cast it 3 times, but you'd be dividing 2,400 into 9,400, which if you're in the midst of battle, doing these calculations is not optimal. And now let's look at the Shadowbringers example. So for the Shadowbringers example, you have 10,000 MP at level 80. And TBN is 3,000 MP. If you drop the 2 zeros off of the Blackest Night, you will see you'll be left with a 30. So you can accurately say that this skill will take 30% of my gauge, and that you can read the MP bar via the number. It's easy math because it's based on 10. And granted, that's easy for Dark Knight. It's easy for Paladin because for Paladin skills, they're all 2,000 MP. It's a little bit tougher for healers because you'll have like cures that are about 700 to 800. Or 700 to 800 MP at least at this level, but still you can drop the zeros and look at it and like this is the percentage MP I will use with this skill. And then you can kind of quickly, okay, how many times does 8 go into 100? Yeah, about 12. But it's a much faster calculation than doing 2400 into 9480. And that's why I think they did this. So when Yoshida addressed this topic at the media tour, he told us he wanted to make sure that MP was easy to read and easy to understand for people that had the duty of refreshing that. This makes it plain and simple how much MP you have, how much MP you're going to use, and how much MP the rest of your party has. No longer do you have to discern how much of a bar they have left. Is it half? Is it 3/4? Is it a little less than half? No longer. You can look at the number and it's quicker. It's milliseconds quicker to look at the number and you can take an action off of that. It's little. It looks like a big change, but if my line of thinking is correct, we only know that MP maxes out at 10,000. My speculation is that when you start out the game, you start out with 100 MP. At some point, maybe around Heavensward, level 50, level 60, you get to 1,000 MP, probably level 50, and then at level 60, 70, and 80, you get to 10,000. And that'll keep proportional to the HP growth that your character has. So that way, since you're using powers of 10 the entire time, you always know, and you'll know how to read MP the entire time you've been playing. We can tell new players to just look at the first 2 to 3 numbers on their MP bar. Like look at it as if it were a percentage, and that makes it so much easier than having to train them via encounters to sort of read the party list. Any less reading that you can do is more time to react. While I could never see this happening with HP, it would be really interesting if they took the values and changed the HUD in a way that you could have the option of seeing your HP as a percentage. So if you feel like that's easier to read than the bar itself, then that'd be a nice value add. That'd be a great quality of life update if you wanted that option. If you like seeing big numbers, and I know tanks love seeing the big numbers, I mean, looking at having over 100,000 HP normally without any buffs is quite awesome. But just being able to have that ability would be amazing. But the point is pretty much the change buys you milliseconds. The change makes you think a little bit less. And that kind of leads into the next part and the second part of this discussion, which is the overshield display. And the overshield display is interesting, and I'm only bringing this up because my community was they were a bit not happy with the way it was designed. And they're in the community run by a designer. I completely understand that, like, visuals are important, right? But in this case, I am totally on board with function outperforming form. And the reason that is because of readability and usability. So overshield displays are everywhere. We have them in Halo. We have them in other first-person shooters. You always see this bar on top of another bar. It's a nice kind of way to illustrate. It's a metaphor. You're shielding the UI. You're overlaying the UI to indicate that there's a shield there, correct? So why does Final Fantasy happen to do it over your name if you filled the bar already? There are two arguments that I want to bring up. The first is that usually when you see overshields, at least in a good amount of the games that I've seen overshields in, you see them in they're pretty large pieces of UI. The Halo overshield, for instance, takes a good third of the top of your screen. and it has a nice little boom sound when you're being notified of when that overshield is going up. There are multiple cues to tell you that you're getting this. Final Fantasy XIV's party list doesn't have that luxury. If we look at why Yoshi P said they did this because they wanted healers to see at a glance, or anybody that, if a tank casts a shield on itself, they wanted to be able for people to see how much of that shield is actually being affected, because it was never a shield. You never know when it went down. You never knew how much you had. There was no visual representation of that. So adding that visual representation, awesome. But the way they did it, for some people. Me, no, because the way they did it with the amount of space they had, and we're not going to ask people to like blow up their party list to 200%, but if you have your party list at 100% and you see that little yellow bar at the top, you know it's there. It's explicit. It's an explicit UI element that is in the way of your name. So when you look over to the party list to see what's there, you will see it. And this kind of harkens back to some of my old web days where I would sit down and do a design, and the engineers that I'd be working with would intentionally turn like a search bar red because they wanted me to fix it. We just programmed the search bar, it's red and yellow, it's hideous. And I'd act on it right then because I'm like, I don't want to see this hideous thing. Sometimes good design can make things implicit. It kind of hides things. So I've been guilty of overlooking things that needed design work because they looked like they fit already. Stuff that calls out your attention sticks out like a sore thumb, and this does that. It's a yellow bar on top of a blue bar that is not supposed to be there. It's not supposed to be over your name. And granted, it's different if you've lost some HP. You do have that sort of normal shield indicator showing that yes, you've depleted HP, but you have that much shield, and that makes sense within that context. Having that display there will do so much for telling healers that yes, there are shields applied, and it's a very quick millisecond saved, rather than trying to discern a yellow bar on top of an already full bar. It's weird for me because usually if I was to design this myself, I probably would have done that overshield bit because I'm kind of used to that. It kind of makes sense. HP incorporates this bar, so of course if you're going to be extending your HP in a way by shielding it, that you would cover the bar in a way. But the fact that they did this, I'm completely on board with it. And obviously your mileage may vary, and we won't be able to see what that's like until we're actually, in raids, in dungeons, in trials using it. It was a very small change that could have a very big effect on your everyday experience. So it was really important for me to point these out and to sort of explain the reasoning of why I think they're there. I was about to say that, it's not only is it a lesson in good design, and you may not agree with me because design is obviously subjective, but it's the way that this design team works. If anything, it's great to be able to see how they work and anticipate what they're going to do next. Because if anything, this is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Shadowbringers changes, and I'm not just talking about 5.0, but I'm talking the road to 6. There's so much they can do now, and I can't wait to see what's next. I really hope you've gotten something out of this video, and even if you didn't, maybe we've awoken your design eye just a little bit to all of the things that are coming out in Shadowbringers, UI-wise, user experience-wise, and quality of life-wise. Please support all of the content that's coming out of all of the wonderful creators that went to the media tour, and please look forward to all the content coming out of here regarding the user experience of Final Fantasy XIV. Again, I love doing these, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. But until then,